Welcome back to the Weight of Coaching podcast, the show where we dig into the systems, strategies, and science behind high performance coaching and strength and conditioning. I'm your host, Jordan Browne, head coach here at Method Barbell. Each episode, we talk with coaches, researchers, and practitioners who are building better athletes through clear methods and smart programming. Today's guest is Max Aita, a world class coach known for his deep technical knowledge, decades of experience in Olympic weightlifting, and his work developing Coach Logic and weightlifting AI, platforms designed to help coaches and athletes bring structure, efficiency, and data driven insights into their practice. In this episode, we explore the future of coaching technology, the role of AI in supporting decision making, and how a systems based approach can transform both athlete performance and the way coaches work. So, Max, how are you doing today?
Good, but you missed handsome, handsome
Shoot.
and taller than he looks,
That's
taller than he
true.
looks on paper.
He's at least 6'2".
But
I
yeah,
met him in real life, so
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm also
Six
6 foot
two.
at that point,
It's
so
Canadian, so it's a
yeah.
little different.
The
Um,
conversion's a little weird.
yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on this. I feel like over the last year, there's been a lot more of a stir of people doing stuff in the weightlifting space, like more podcasts, more um, more podcasts, more um, coaching accounts, coaches, et cetera, et cetera. You know, Makes
What
sense.
why do you think there's such an increase in that right now?
I think um, um, it's because I have two theories. I think one, and I would attribute a lot of this to probably like Dylan Cooper, being there was a lot of weightlifting content that existed. Um, you know, like uh, like just in general, there was people making videos. We did it, Juggernaut, and all that stuff. But then like there kind of was this big lull where everybody it almost felt like no one was producing educational content, and so then everybody was just like, who cares? Like it doesn't matter because no one's talking about it. Um, you know, um, I think that's the kind of thing where um, it it's like the market drives it. So then what happens is someone like Dylan comes along. Zach was making videos, he stopped, but like someone like Dylan comes along and starts to like reinvigorate, and other people see it. And then I think there's a very much a sense of like, oh, he must be making a lot of money because people don't do anything unless they make money, right? As I say this, tongue in cheek to a weightlifting market. But like the reality is, like I think that kind of stirs up excitement about it, right? And so other people get in, and now you see a lot of people invested in it and pushing it, which is good. It's all a good thing. And Weightlifting House is probably in there too. It's just the fact that like more energy, more stuff is moving around, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of that, you know, and so on. So like it becomes this bigger thing. Um, but yeah, I think that's like kind of like I've noticed there's a sense of like there's more stuff happening, at least on the business side, people trying to make money in weightlifting and taking their knowledge, expertise, and pushing it out there. And they're seeing these things like, hey, there's a club in Texas with 250 members. Like I could have a club with 50 people and that could be this much money. And so I think there's a lot of that going on. I also think it's much easier to do. It's very low barrier to entry now. Especially when you consider, any number of AI tools that can help you plan and outline and do these things that can augment someone's process where they wouldn't have done that before. But that's just, maybe it's just my vibes because I'm like neck deep in it all the time.
Yeah, when I kind of look around the past 5 years, just even in my like niche in Alberta, the clubs have really shifted away from like that old guard, leading into kind of these younger clubs that have that energy or that invigoration to do that media, to do something along that, and kind of looking at the clubs in the states or like the popular clubs is kind of a similar kind of vibe where like the newer younger coaches are starting to get more popular. uh, they're starting to become those hubs for where athletes go at that top level. because they have more marketing. They have
Yeah.
that social proof of like I can get those athletes to this level and whatnot. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I think so. I think there's a lot to be said for social media drives everything at this point, right? I mean, it's not like it's new.
no, I hate it every second of it. I'm like, okay, I just have to do this. As soon as I shifted my framework from giving material to the people that I think are my ideal clients to like I'm just trying to help my athletes having these conversations that I have with them, which in the grand scheme of things is still my ideal client target or profile. It started being a lot easier where I'm like, I'm just having the conversations that I have every day and just posting these online, similar to kind of what this podcast is like. Once I stopped trying to force it to be this thing and trying to force like be posting for other people and just posting for me and my club, it got way easier, way less stressful.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between the current, I mean, not the current. There's a difference between like how do you say this? All of this depends on how you start, like what your intent is. If your intentions when you start this are to make money, right? If you're the kind of person who's like, I'm looking for, uh, a good way to think about this, like if you're like getting into the space of I want to make money, what are my skills? What are those skills worth? And who would buy them? How can I sell them? And you choose weightlifting, then you end up in the place you're in, right? Which is what I think a lot of us did. Um, it was probably the other way around, more like I have these skills. Are they worth money? Can I sell them to people? Um, and the other side of it is like, um, if you started the other way and said, "Hey, I want to make a lot of money. What's going to make money?" You look at the weightlifting space and you're like, "Oh, I can fill this need." I think there's a bigger group of people now getting into weightlifting from that perspective. Like, I want to make money and I'm going to do it through weightlifting because I see there's an opportunity because other people are doing it. And clearly you wouldn't continue doing what you're doing with all these accounts and blah, 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 if you weren't making money at it, you know?
We're supposed to be making money off this? Oh shoot.
Yeah. Right.
I,
The irony of that too is like you could take a coach who does remote coaching and let's say you have an athlete and you're charging between 150 to 200 a month. If it's at a gym, your margins are probably cut in half, so you're making half of that. And then you think about like taking them to like a national championship and you're like, I just coached that person for free for a year, and then
yeah.
they quit because they didn't make a PR.
Yep.
But yeah, it's like I think now there's a different space where people are getting into weightlifting or this kind of stuff purely to make money. I mean, it's been happening in fitness for years, but like weightlifting specifically was isolated because it's so difficult to learn. It's so much time invested. But there are a lot of people that just want to come in and figure it out. I mean, I coach people that are like no interest in doing a meet, no interest in going to a gym. They train at home. They just love doing snatches and clean and jerks, and like they enjoy it. And they're not the typical person you would be like, they don't watch weightlifting on the internet. They don't care about that. They just like doing that stuff, you know?
Yeah, I remember I've been watching these like Everfit Academy videos that they've been putting out every so
Yeah.
often, and you listen to like some of the coaches that are talking about this like one to many model, and it's like, yeah, you expect like 250 to 500 people paying you, and you don't have to do anything, and I'm like, that's crazy, because like in weightlifting, there's probably a few brands that can achieve that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then most coaches like thinking about that the niche and the market's so small, and to beat those other people that are providing so much value outside of that is like
Yeah.
you're probably
Yeah.
never going to get there.
I agree. I think I think it's a weird space because you can't quite apply every bit of learning and knowledge from other spaces, right? Like the high ticket offers. You're probably not going to get a lot of $5,000 offers from weightlifters, and I mean it from the perspective of like Olympic weightlifters that are doing the sport to compete. They're out there for sure, but it's not the same kind of, it's like you would be better off just pursuing that in personal training, right? You have way more success, way bigger market. So like not every single thing is the same or works well. Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of switching the conversation into the more AI scheme. So tell me about weightlifting AI and then its integration now into Coach Logic.
Yeah. So the we started out a while back building. We built weightlifting AI, and that was like sort of I wanted this idea of like, okay, we should be able to automate a lot of this stuff. And automate is the wrong word, but basically like there's a lot of decisions that need to be made, and building a training program can become this thing of like everyone gets paralyzed by it. Um, it's also like the tediousness and the meticulousness of it are important. I had the experience of realizing that like if you really spend the time and get to that place and build it and like do a great job of the program, you get great results from it. It's undeniable. There's not a question that writing a program for somebody where you take time to calculate and build things out correctly and manage it, meaning actually take the athlete through it, you'll get great results versus just writing something down and handing it to them. I think it's really easy to just live in a space where you say, okay, we're gonna do, um, we're gonna do whatever. We're gonna go heavy this day and do this and this and this, and it's basic and it works. And then you see that like, that only works when you tell people it works. And the reality is like when you have people run through it, it's like, yeah, your 8 rep max squat went up, but like you're a shittier weightlifter than you were, or you're not moving any better, or you're slower, or nothing is really improving. You don't go to competitions, so you don't have any metric of gauging whether or not your training is good. And so, yeah, all these things are what I realized. Like, hey, we want to build something like this that can do this. The initial one was really like a good exercise in data collection, getting an idea as to like what people are doing, what they get from it, how they behave with things. And we learned a lot. Like we learned a ton about what people really want. And the huge thing is that people really want to have a human in the mix on some level, or they want to have some degree of like trust with what they're doing. So you need to be able to explain every single decision along the way. And that was kind of the intent, was when designing and building a training program, I, I like, I designed the app with this idea that I'm going to be able to explain why you do this set and this rep. And if I can't explain the logical chain to get there, then I don't know why I'm doing it. It doesn't mean it's the wrong choice, but I need to be able to do that. And so that was the original goal. And we got pretty close to that. There was definitely some, good and bad, and anything outside of the business side and the product side of dealing with those things, you know, um, are what they are in business. But I think for me, the thing that I wanted to get out of it long term is the ability to have this deeper understanding of like, why would we do this or that, and use reasoning to make those choices. Fast forward now to, what we've done, and I started a new company called Coach Logic, that is like essentially a coaching version of an AI platform where we give coaches the ability to, to write programs and do these things. So it's a competitor to like a Train Heroic or a True Coach or those kind of things. So it's basic in the sense that it's just a coaching platform, but we've designed it with the intent that we're going to integrate a lot of AI stuff. And what's crazy with all the AI field is that in this space, things move super, super fast. There's a lot of open source improvement in things. And so you end up in a place where you might have an idea to design a certain thing one way, and then find that, hey, the next thing is this other thing is like, way more, way further ahead than it was. And suddenly in 2 months, you have models that can do things they couldn't do before. A great example of this is like, when a lot of these like transformer models came out, and you have these like, GPT and whatever else there is out there, right? Claude and Gemini and stuff. They would be terrible at answering math questions, right? Because in a language model is just inherently not going to be good at math. And then, they get upset, and so they train on math. They do all these things. They'll do whatever. They'll put like code interpreters in. So, you could ask it a simple math question. It can just write a Python script inside of it, and calculate it and then give you the answer. And so it's like these tools just become more and more and more powerful, and there's so much that can be done with them. So we saw it as like, okay, we had an idea. We built a very big framework for what we are going to do with our programming and building this out for coaches. And then as time goes on, you realize like, man, we should pivot to something different because there's so much more potential in this other space. So that whole process is just like a very interesting thing where you go from building something and then like you just, as you go, it's like, oh shit, like we're starting over from scratch. We're starting over from scratch. More so because the technology will go so much further if you move to the right space, and you don't want to be a spot where it's so easy to do the wrong thing and go really far with the wrong thing and end up in a ceiling where you're trapped. And like, man, we built this thing, but this is a bad idea. And that's kind of where we got to with 1.0 with Waving AI is like, the extensibility of it, the guy who built it was not that smart, not that good, and ended up, getting us stuck in a place where it's too difficult for us to, it's not too difficult. It would be so much work for us to revamp what was there versus starting from a better architecture and building on that. Right. And they work fine. It's not that. It's just like you're kind of trapped in a place like, okay, we'd have to like rebuild this completely to get this other thing we want to have happen. So ultimately, this whole diatribe is about saying that the Coach Logic now motto we have is to be as fast as we can, to be as aggressive as we can with building the thing that's going to be extensible next. And so that might mean that as we deliver, AI programming and these things, it's going to be something that moves differently than it did before, or that, we're using different technology in a year than we were. So we found that with the original app, a lot of people wanted coaching. They wanted a human in the mix, and we wanted to build something that's more of a team than it is as just a product. So what we're intending to do is build out the coaching platform for coaches, and then I'll shut down the other app. Once people are done with it, once there's nobody on it, and we'll provide people something more of a service where it's, think about like the standard option is you get $20 a month, $30 a month for a program, and then you get dumped into a Discord or into a Facebook group, and one coach comes around and answers a question here and there. And we want to move to more of like a remote coaching model for the same price, where we'll hire coaches that can basically work, a few hours a day and get paid better than if they were doing, remote coaching with a few people, and they would be able to answer questions and give feedback specifically on each person's video. And we want to build this because we think that this is a better way to leverage these tools, where you have a tool that can build a program really customized, really individualized instantly or within a few minutes. And so you don't have any bandwidth you need from a coach there. Coaches can use tools to make those programs quickly and make changes quickly, do all these things quickly. So the feedback and the coaching is really what is the bottleneck. And that's the kind of thing we want to do, is like build these tools so coaches can use them and then turn it into a product, so we can have a really big team with a bunch of coaches on it and a bunch of athletes and charge very, very little money for it, and make it really available to a lot of people.
So with the coaches being on there, is it kind of going to be athletes get bucketed into a coach? So like a coach gets say 50, 60?
No. What we'll probably do is create like a group. We'll create different groups, and we'll probably have coaches working with everybody. I don't like the idea of, one thing is I want to educate more coaches on coaching and bring in people in that space. The second is I want to be in a spot where we have a group of people that are working with everybody. So there's a lot of exposure, because we don't want something where it turns into this guy's coaching me, that guy's coaching me, and then it becomes like I'm only going to work with them. We want people to have this experience and a broad experience with other coaches. And that also pushes us to be doing things like have a common glossary, and everybody knows the terms, everybody knows how to coach correctly.
I wish that everybody had a common glossary
Yeah.
for weightlifting. I remember talking about that with you a couple years ago, where it's like
Yeah.
you say
Right.
one name and it's like 8 different coaches have different meanings for it.
I
And
give I give Dane Miller a hard time because he does that a lot. He loves to make up words for things and have hyper specific prescriptions, 17 reps,
Yep.
as though 17, your body knows the difference between 17 and 16 and 18 um, the no man's land. And it makes sense to him, but it's like the problem is then you end up with a lot of people with a bunch of different terminology. And it just ends up being really confusing for new people. And the reason you do it is to isolate yourself. If you put together a complete product with a bunch of terms, people latch on. And in a space where there's not a depth of real knowledge, it becomes easy to just build a proprietary system and sell that, right? This is the Jordan Browne, phase, the A phase, the B phase, the C phase, um, we do hypercompensation here, not, it's like all these things where it's like it just no one cares, at the end of the day, but it makes it difficult to compare, and for people to communicate, right?
Yep. Or yeah, I get so many athletes come into the gym and they'll be like, "Hey, my coach programmed this. What do you think this means?" And I'm like, that could mean like eight different
Yeah.
things based off of what
Yeah.
any other coaches told me that they call it. Because I'm like, it'll be like hang snatch or high hang snatch, and I'm like, now that could be two different ways of that. I don't know what the actual answer is because
Yeah.
different coaches all have these different names, and it gets all frustrating. Uh, with the AI, what do you kind of see as the natural progression for coaches to start using AI into their coaching skills?
I think I think that so I mean the way we think this is going to go is what we're building is that you're going to have a platform, some kind of software. Inside that software, you have access to a bunch of different AI tools, and those AI tools will sit at different levels. So what we believe is the case will be you'll use, AI tools to basically do your programming or assist you in programming, so it can generate large pieces of programming. It can modify large pieces of programming. So if you wanted to, delete all your squats from a 20-week long program and replace them with belt squats, like that kind of thing. So anything that deals with the actual program itself should be one layer of this one tool. The second tool would be content. So inside of an app, you want to be able to give a better experience to people that are using your product or that you're giving coaching to. So not just not feedback, but the ability to say, hey, add a description of how every one of these workouts is done, give instructions, or write generic warm ups for everything, where you can really quickly scale the quality of instruction you give to people. And it's largely correct, right? It's not like you're dealing with, it's not like you're dealing with, your, um, like it's not like you're dealing with like, okay, make up all this stuff. It's like, okay, write some warm-ups, someone has a hip shift, use that, do those things. And then the third place, initially is going to be in like understanding your data, so like a co-pilot, where you could ask an AI about somebody's training and say, okay, what are they doing, how are they how are they progressing, what's wrong with their squat, why are they not making more progress, what's going on with my programming. And it could query tons of data inside of this platform and tell you some insights that might be useful. So I think those are the three places initially, and then the final level would be in assisting you giving feedback, and that would be in two forms. One, through language models that would probably let you augment the quality or the content you're giving. Instead of just writing, hey, this set looks really good, you could throw in a couple of keywords and it might draw on that and help you flesh out a better explanation, or suggest cues to you that might make sense, or give you more depth to your feedback, where when you're writing feedback, it's going to give you a lot more optionality for growing that to give a better experience. And then when you're, interpreting feedback, it could pull from everybody's data and be like, hey, this person's been telling you for the last 6 weeks that their wrist hurts and you probably should cut out the snatches. And then the final piece of that would be like computer vision, where you'd be able to draw real data from the video. So, bar velocity, bar tracking, error identification, these things. those are all a bigger question mark. Like, how much does that really matter? Do coaches just have a better eye for quickly assessing? I mean, you and I could probably watch a video for you and I could watch a video for or a lift for less than probably the first 8 inches of it and tell you what's right or wrong or what's going to happen, right? Um, so yeah, that's what I think is like overall this, and then obviously, who knows? It could be 10 times this, or it could be way less. We don't know.
Yeah, well, with it moving so fast, it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly where it's going. It makes such a big difference being able to create the program so quickly, because I find a lot of coaches will just use True Coach or not use the statistics or the data collection from their programs,
Yeah.
because creating a spreadsheet is so much effort. And then as they get bigger, it's like to create a spreadsheet and implement all of the data into a spreadsheet and then want something that has a better user interface
Yes.
takes so much time to do all three. Uh, how how is the data visualized on Coach Logic?
So currently we visualize things like a long-term planner. So you have like, you know, you have basically an infinite calendar you can look at. You can look at each week and break it down by every lift. And currently we track three metrics that I think are most useful, which would be like total number of reps, the average weight of the barbell, and then the peak weight for that week. And what you can do is, at a glance, look at like snatches and then break down all the snatch movements they had in that whatever time period, month or year or whatever it is, and look at this graph and say, okay, average weight was going relatively stable, peak weight was fluctuating a lot, and the volume was all over the place, or the volume progressed linearly or whatever, and draw some conclusions. As we integrate the Copilot into this, all the agentic AI into it, we'll have the ability to just ask these questions. So you won't even need charts and graphs. And a lot of the LLMs are really powerful. So you can do things like generate graphs on the spot and these things. Again, we'll decide if we do that. But like the goal here would basically be like, what do you want to get out of this? Like, what data are you looking for? And then we can give you that. But more importantly, it's about people who don't know what they're looking for need to be given something or prompted to give something. So you might have a coach who doesn't know anything about what they should be looking for as far as volume and intensity go. And it would be like, you could ask a question like, hey, what's going on? And it could give you a response that would say, well, let's look at the 3 or 4 most important metrics, right? One, is their technique good? You'll have to answer that yourself. But if the technical problems are persisting, then the program is sort of secondary. Two, let's look at volume. Let's look at intensity. Here's what these factors mean. Here's what we know is true from, from whatever we've told it to say is true. As far as like the context we've given it, plus the reasoning it has. And then you end up in a place where you should be able to just ask questions that are more basic, right? Your input should never be wrong, if that makes sense. Like, you should never have a mistake where you ask it a question and it doesn't get it right, or it doesn't know what you're asking, right? Or doesn't know how to help you. And so any kind of AI tool should end up at that point where you don't need to craft the perfect prompt. You should just be able to ask a question, right? Like, hey, tell me I'm hungry for um, pizza, and I'm in New York City. And it would be able to give you not just like a list of all the pizza restaurants. It would be able to say, well, from your history, I know that you're a vegan and blah, 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 blah. So here's these, and you're a mile from all these other places, and this one gets rated highly, and it has, lines like there's a lot more detail there as far as it, like, is the question is concerned, that you wouldn't have to craft. Whereas something like Google, which has no, searching Google, you just get all the information. So we don't want to be in that space of like, hey, here's all the data, and then your job to figure it out. That some coaches want that, but other coaches will want just the answers. So it's to say, Jordan's snatch isn't improving. And be, okay, let's look at the process of what might be wrong and making his snatch not improve, right? One, he's got red hair. That's a huge problem. Two,
Immediate fail.
yeah, immediate fail. Two, his snatch volume has been stable for the last 6 weeks. Three, his average intensity has decreased, and that's a byproduct of adding more lighter lifts and more power snatches. And it's like on and on. Like, you want to just be given this answer where if you asked an expert coach, they could do that, right? So that's the goal, is to get to that point where it's not so much just, hey, here's data, have fun with it. We want to be like, you ask the question and we can give you a real answer to that. And the answer is not just yes or no. The answer is often going to be something like, let's analyze what's gone on.
Hmm. Yeah. One thought that I have is for coaches that kind of have their experience or have specific things that they tend to look at, is there a plan to be able to put in to
A
almost
memory?
create, yeah, almost create the graphs or the charts that they want to see, that they kind of view as important?
Yeah. So I was talking to my business partner. He's the lead developer, he's the CTO. He and I were talking about some interesting stuff where we'll basically be able to we think we'll be able to create some kind of a memory, that'll have like each user will have a specific degree of memory where the things you ask for more often will be more likely to come up. All these things are basically just probabilistic machines where if you're using volume graphs all the time and looking at volume all the time, it'd be the kind of thing that would be most obvious to come up and talk about. And again, it's like a lot of this is also about speed. It's like how much do you need to know what a graph looks like versus knowing the delta between where you were and where you are now, right? Like, it might be that a lot of the way the data is assimilated or described is in text, and that might be more efficient for coaches because they can just read a paragraph and say, okay, here's this, and this. And then it would even maybe give a suggestion to say his volume's been low the last 3 weeks. Um, you know, my recommendation would be increase it by 10%. Do you want me to modify next week? That would be this is like the North Star of what we're trying to do. So it all depends on, this is all user feedback that we'll have to get as we go, as we build it, to get it there.
It's kind of like an interesting concept thinking about it, where earlier in this conversation we were talking about how you had to keep up to make sure you had the best product, or keep up with the things that were accelerating the fastest.
Yeah.
Something that I notice with coaches is like they'll hesitate to kind of jump on
Mm-hmm.
or to use new information that's coming out because they have all of this sunk cost in
Yeah.
what they've been doing for so long. And just even thinking about this, where it's like, I want to see the charts because that's what I've always used. That's what I use right now. And you commenting that is like challenging me to be like, okay, like, is it the charts or is it just the visualization of those deltas between the two that
Mm-hmm.
actually matters? And if I just had the numbers, does my workflow get faster where I'm not having to interpret that?
Yeah, and you have to think about it too. It's like, how much would the visualization of the chart affect you if that chart, if one of the axes on the chart was really different and it looked way different, would you be more inclined to be like, oh shit, volume went way up week 1 to 2, but it's actually only 20 more reps, but it looks bigger, right? So like, there's a ton of that. And I think there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of sunk cost fallacy. Like, there's two things I notice most with coaches. It is they fall into one of a few camps. One is, I've built a workflow and a system that works for me, and my only concern now is making more money, or managing what I have, and that works fine, which is great. That's awesome. If you have spreadsheets and WhatsApp, or you use another platform, like, that's, you've built out a system, and that's fine, and you're on the other end of just trying to grow your business. The other side is people that are super disorganized and are piecing things together, or they don't want to pay money for a product, or they don't want to do this, or they're just like, they're in a place where they're trying to get the most out of the least, and it ultimately probably hurts them because they just end up in a spot where they miss feedback, or they miss this, or they don't have an organization, they have no systems, and it's just kind of winging it, right? And they oftentimes, I see those people, they're not the people that are, neither one of these groups, in my opinion, are the people that are sitting there and doing a lot of detailed analysis. One side is like, do we have a program? Check. That's done. Everybody in the gym's got cleans today. Check. That's it. I fix it in post. I fix it when I'm coaching them. I add sets or take sets away or do whatever, and I make it up there. The other side is kind of like, you don't really need any of that stuff. Like, I'm just coaching. Like, just send me your videos and I'll tell you what's wrong with each lift. And then when it doesn't work, I'll, tell you what to do next. And then there's the other group, which is people that are really interested in tinkering and they want to build a thing, and they build a spreadsheet and they have this massive thing. And really what they're pretending to do is be engineers. And they're like, I'm going to build a giant spreadsheet that, does all this stuff. But it's like, a spreadsheet is just a giant deterministic thing that calculates a bunch of numbers where, again, you might as well just write the templates, and you could build, more templates with a spreadsheet, but you're really just in a spot of like copy and pasting still, right? You're building out a bunch of different options and sending them off to people and kind of being like, that's good enough. That's close, right? But yeah, so I think there's like a bunch of these different categories people fall into versus people that would be saying like, I care about the high level element of coaching. I understand how to program. I understand the principles, the science, the systematic approach. And because of that, I could manage other coaches. And that, I think, is the skill set that will be valuable and worthwhile in the future where AI is doing the other work, right? It's like, if you couldn't sit down and manage a team of other coaches when they came to you and said, hey, this guy is not making progress on his snatch, and let me tell you what's going on. His volume is this, intensity, blah, 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 exercise choices. What do you think? And you could say, oh, I bet it's this. Let's make a change there. That's the skill set that I think will take coaches a lot further in the future, because again, it's like, you're going to have tools that are extremely intelligent, extremely fast, super powerful. And if you're the kind of person who's doing the work of what those tools do now, will be doing in the future, your job is limited, right? Because somebody else who can manage those tools will eat it up. So I think that's what, where things will head.
So with that, for people that aren't doing, or are those people that are just doing the work that these AI are going to take place of, what what do you think they should push towards or start doing to
I think they
prevent
should.
themselves?
Yeah, I think they should keep doing what they're doing. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I don't think it's going to be some kind of like catastrophe in weightlifting. Um, I think it's a kind of thing where it's good for people to understand how to do things at a deeper level and a higher level, and think more from the perspective of, and this is just general good practice in every business, is to build systems, right? Is to be like, I have a system for how do I approach the problem. Not everything is unique, right? If five people have the same issue, if they all jump forward, like, the list of solutions is small, right? It's not going to include, whatever XYZ exercise is going to have these 5 or 6 things in it. They might be organized in different ways. Each athlete might need more or less, but you need to have a system, which is to say, not just like copy and paste, but in principle, fixing this problem revolves around these things. Use reason to create a good program for that. In principle, people who are successful or failing, based on this kind of training system or this kind of volume or whatever, we should make modifications this way. So get yourself to a point where you understand the principles of training in the system. And then from there, you will have a better understanding of how to manage larger systems, like, and disseminate this information. And do the same thing in all business, right? Like, you wouldn't sit there and just do your books manually, on paper every single month, like when you could put them in a spreadsheet or use an app or whatever, where it would do that over and over again. And then if you integrate it to a workflow, it becomes even more automated, right? And becomes even more powerful. But again, fundamentally, you'd have to understand, like, what are the principles that drive, a business. Well, we have to have a margin. We have to have, like, we have to make money. We have to provide something. We have costs, expenses. So, like, I think all these people should be focusing on, if you're the kind of person who's just like, I coach in the gym and that's probably fine, right? Like, in the gym's not going to change. There's not going to be some robot that comes in and teaches you snatch and clean and
No
jerk.
Robomax.
I mean, honestly, there probably will be at some point, like some humanoid robot, I'm sure. If you see the rate at which they're getting, there's this like race to build them. But that's a skill set, and that's a human soft skill, and like coaching at meets is a soft skill, and like coaches are super valuable. The other side of it, though, is like if you want to scale beyond that and grow into an actual business where you could step away and somebody could operate it, where any of these things exist in a sustainable way, then you have to move towards understanding the systems, and that applies to coaching as well. Like, what is the methodology you use? What are the systems in place to execute that methodology? And then learning how to manage that stuff is going to be the key, I think.
I there's this concept that Mark Manson put out recently. Stu McMillan uh, edited it to kind of reflect it as like a coaching practice,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like four stages of your coaching career. Where the first stage is going to be like that mimicry stage, where you just copy
Yeah,
somebody. So
yeah.
when I first started coaching, you go to this stage and you kind of have to, because you need somebody to give you this system, this processes or these processes and methods of how to start coaching. And then you move from this mimicry stage to this self-discovery stage where you start testing things. And what I find a lot of coaches will do is they'll try and jump there really quickly before they kind of have enough experience in that kind of mimicry stage of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm just watching what happens when this program goes through. It's like, oh, I want to test this thing. And they see this thing on Instagram. They're like, I'm going to try this. And they just like throw it in and it doesn't work. It works. And they have no idea why.
Mm-hmm.
So they try and jump to that before they kind of have that base expertise. So then from that self discovery, it's like this dedication or this intentionality stage where it's like you
Yeah.
deep dive into learning everything that you have. So it's like, okay, these are my principles that I'm basing my knowledge off of. How do the methods that I kind of implement into this program affect the athlete, or what happens? What's the cause or the effect that happens? And you start developing this system and building that out, and then from that dedication or that intentionality, it goes to this legacy stage or this giving back. So this is where you start coaching other coaches and teaching them. And I like the framework because it kind of gives you a way of like progressing through your coaching career,
Mm-hmm.
where you need to start off with some sort of system and build from there, where it's like you need to experience what coaching feels like. You need to experience what happens when an athlete runs through a program, instead of always trying to like pick and choose in the moment. And it's something that I see a lot with the newer coaches, just constantly like just grabbing at new things instead of being like, okay, I found this coach, he mentored me, this is the system that I'm going to utilize, figuring it out and experiencing that and then moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same, right? I mean, that's exactly what we all kind of do when we start. If everyone took great advice and did it from day one, then there'd be so many more successful people so much sooner, right?
Yep.
There's something funny I heard the other day that I thought was interesting. It was like a really short blurb from, it was actually Mark Zuckerberg, and someone asked him a question about how important experience was, and I kind of questioned it for a minute because this is something. So this is something to think about. There's this question that I want to say Dylan Cooper asked, which was like, and they kind of do this thing, like, nothing against them, but they just do this thing that I think is really stupid, which is like when somebody gives you feedback or asks a question, you ask them what's their total, and then basically like shit on them because if their total is not good enough, they don't deserve to give any feedback. And essentially, what it's doing is it's saying experience trumps everything, right? And experience is the most valuable thing. And that, like, if I have experience, it means I know more than you. I'm more capable. And I heard this thing Zuckerberg said, which is funny. And he made a comment, and he was like, "I made Facebook and was successful at like early 20s." And he said, so I can't possibly justify putting lots of weight into the value of experience because I had none when I did what I did. And it makes you think for a minute. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's a degree of this, like maybe people overweight this idea of experience. And it becomes this thing almost of like, well, experience is the most valuable thing. It's like, I know a lot of coaches that have coached for a long time that are terrible, and a lot of people that have done things for a long time that are very bad at it. And there are other people who are exceptionally talented that have never done something and they step into an arena and they become wildly successful with it. So aptitude, I think, is the only real metric that actually matters, right? Think about anything. Everybody learned something from the beginning. So like experience can't possibly be the most defining characteristic for these things, like, what's valuable, what's not, right? And in anything, like you're saying, like mimicking something is almost like a mistake in some cases, in a lot of ways. The best thing I always like to hear is like the Soviet hockey analogy was like, the Soviet hockey coach. I don't know if the story's true or not, but he didn't want to watch any other hockey players ever. He just wanted to figure it out on his own because he felt if we just mimic somebody else, we'll only ever be second best to them because we'll never replicate their system as well as they do. And if we do that, we're just trapped in this local maximum, right? Where he was like, let's develop our own system that emerges from our own experience and our own, practice. And that system was extremely dominant. And it was almost the polar opposite to what the Canadians did at the time. And so, I'm sure I butchered that. I'm sure some hockey player in Canada is going to listen to this
Yeah, they're gonna be upset.
and be mad. But the point being, like, yeah, I think there's almost way too much of this leverage put on experience, or even success in itself, right? It's like, oh, you have 250 remote clients, you must be really good at coaching. And it's like, well, one, you're probably looking at the wrong data point, because like you're really good at having a lot of remote clients, which might be a very different skill set than coaching. It might be that you optimize for something very different than the quality of the output. You might optimize for retention, which involves, 80% emotional connection versus 20%, quality coaching. And I'm just making things up, but like the idea is that it's very easy to get distracted by what we think makes sense because we see something and it's like, well, yeah, experienced people must be smarter. It's like, well, maybe they're not. And the reality is the more experience you have, the more likely you have a lot of biases, right? Or anything, right? Any of these situations could be incorrect. So like you said, this idea of these stages, like mimicking stuff, especially initially, could be a really detrimental process where if you can get a better position early on and you focus more on your skills and your aptitude, and like, what am I going to be good at? What skills do I possess that are good? Should I leverage those to start this thing or do whatever?
What are some pieces of advice for new coaches wanting to kind of develop uh, a system or understanding the principles of coaching?
I think the first thing, yeah, is like always take a first principles approach to anything. Like learn what the principles of training are, learn how physiology works to our understanding, learn anatomy, and then study the sport from the perspective of how the sport is executed, right? Don't go down the rabbit hole of looking at like what the Chinese do or the Bulgarians or whoever, look at each individual situation and try to analyze like what makes lifts successful, what are negotiable, variables or what are not, right? What is the best in the world, what are the requirements of the sport and how are the best in the world as a whole implementing those. And then at the same time you have to tease out the differences there, right? um, should you ignore people that are using, anabolics to improve their performance? I mean, if you understand the principle there, like what's going on, you might not need to ignore it, right? You might say, okay, well, I understand that this group is on drugs or this guy's on drugs, and how does that modify his training? What is that? What's the manifestation of that? The other side of this would be to go down this route of getting as much data as you can and then trying to sort through what is useful and what's not, and of really getting away from any biases, trying to avoid the pitfalls of like drawing conclusions just based on what you think makes sense. Oh, if you do enough snatch balances, you'll be really fast under the bar because I do this for that. I mean, a great example is when you ask somebody why they're doing something, they'll tell you because. And it's like, we do squats because his legs are weak. It's like, okay, like I get there's like a connection there, but it's like, you know, um, really what it is that like you're doing squats to make, to improve the general capacity of his leg strength. And what can we do with that? How do we transfer that? Like, is there a deeper strategy than just A plus B equals C, right? So again, principles like going down this rabbit hole of like starting from the scratch, very, very slow level, and think mostly of what are the principles that are at play here, like what is going on versus the emergent thing, which is the program and the athlete and the technique and these things. Those are influenced by so many more variables, right?
One thing I see pretty consistently is when you look to what these other people are doing, let's say like the Team China or Team Bulgaria in
Mm-hmm.
their heyday, of like you see what they're doing at the level that they're doing it, and then you try and mimic what they're doing now instead of what they did
Yeah,
to get to that level. And it'll be like, oh, this athlete's training 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And so you'll have these new athletes come in and they'll be like, oh, I need to train. If I want to get there, I need to train 5 days a week. And
yeah,
it skips over like these principles of like, how do we create long term athlete development over a long period of time where it's like you pull too many levers so quickly to try and be like, oh, X athlete has this happens a lot when an athlete has potential and they're like, I want to do this thing. Coaches will just be like, well, yeah, you want to get here, so let's increase your training sessions to 5 days a week. They're all going to be hard sessions. You're squatting 3, 4 times a week. And then that the athlete has this huge skyrocket, but then just plateaus really hard for a year until like their minimum effective volume can kind of catch up and their adaptive resistance goes down.
yeah. And it's also this thing of like, it's that's such a common thing is like to look at like what somebody's done and be like, okay, I'm gonna do that. Or like it's also like you could look at someone who's done a 200 kilo clean and jerk or something, but it's taken them 15 years to get there. And it's almost like this question of like, that's such a long time. And was their training just really bad the whole time? Or did they accomplish something way to the end of what their genetic capacity is? Right. And so it's like, it's hard to tease that out. Right. Because it's like, we want to look at programming as how efficient is it, right? If you have two athletes and they both do 200 reps a week or whatever, and ultimately one of them makes 40 kilos of progress in their total in 3 months, the other makes 10, like there's genetic differences there clearly. But then you look at like one athlete doing a program with 200 reps a week and the same athlete doing one with 350, and they make 2% more progress. It's like, well, that 350 reps a week is so much more work. It's not any more efficient. It's barely getting them much better. So while exposing to all kinds of like potential injury and all this. So it's this kind of thing where you have to analyze those, right? Like somebody might be really, really good, or a system might really, really work, but what is the cost of that, right? And I'm not saying like, oh, people get injured. Like everyone gets injured. The Bulgarians were injured just as much as the Russians. Everyone's injured. There's no difference in any of them. The result of it is just like, okay, you do XYZ to get this result, and then somebody else does way less than that and gets better results, and that's a consistent thing we see. Clearly the programming is more efficient, is better. I look at myself, like I ground myself up to pieces trying to squat big weights, and I got to 700ish and a little over that. And I look at kids today that are way smaller, train way less, and are way faster to those numbers than I was. I mean, it took me a decade plus, and there's people that do it in 5 years, 4 years, right? So it's like this thing we have to remember is like, you know, yeah, squat every day works, but it's terrible because it's super inefficient and like a lot of excess just waste, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and then it's like survivor bias.
Yeah. Whoever made it through, and that's everywhere, right? Like it's easy to I mean, like yeah, we people love to romanticize the Bulgarian system in so many weird ways. It's like a fetish here. It's like, oh, it's super hard and only the best survive, and they ground people up, and there was thousands of guys dead on the street. And it's like that just wasn't true. I talked to them, I lived with them. Like there was no, I mean, everybody was fucking hurt. Like all the Russians were hurt. I mean, Klokov talked about like everybody had fucking herniated discs in their back, and everybody was beaten up, and there's surgeries all over the place. This is pro sports, right? Like it's not like the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, that's a different team, but like, it's not like it's not like the best team in football they don't have any injuries and the other teams all have injuries. Like everybody is the same. Um, so yeah, it's like this whole thing of like, yeah, we romanticize these things, but we people like to do this. They like to ascribe like little pieces to build their bias up, right? Like, oh, Bulgarians, yeah, but everyone got hurt. Or, oh, the Russian system is better because it has this. Or Chinese are doing it better and they have a secret and they're doing something special. It's like, no, everyone's a human being. Everyone's physiology is the same. Like, if there's some kind of data that shows that some group is doing it better, I 100% guarantee they have some kind of route to circumvent drug testing on some level. Like it's been proven. This has been shown. So
Like North Korea showing up,
yeah,
what
I
was
mean,
it,
it's like
last year?
it's obvious because it's like if they weren't on drugs and then you gave them drugs and their performances were 10% greater, you're telling me that whatever fantasy you have about anyone, if they were 10% stronger and they're now 9% over the world record, that's a feasible thing. Like they're already at the limit. Like, so I just find it funny, right? Yeah, people just love to do that, and you have to, right? You kind of build these biases in your mind to justify the behaviors you have, right? And instead of just saying, "Hey, I love it. I love that North Korea shows up sauced up out of their mind." Like that's fun. That's
It was
great to
cool
see. When they go home and we never see them again, like it's not my life, so I guess I'm okay with it.
when they lose to Olivia Reeves and then you don't see
Yeah,
him and you're like, oh, well,
yeah. I mean, you go to Metro too. Like, I guarantee you, if you go in the back room, you talk to a bunch of Chinese, North Korean women, they'll tell you about some insane conspiracy about Olivia Reeves in the United States. And Tarakti did that. He tried to blame the U.S. conspiracy on his doping violation at the Olympics, and it's just like there's so much of this. Like everybody just plays these stupid games. Like, granted, it is what it is, but the whole degree of like biases and these things, we attach them to things we don't even realize, right? Your favorite lifter on YouTube, whoever he is, uh, you know, is or isn't on drugs. Like you have to disregard that, right? And just say like, what exactly am I looking at, especially as a coach? Like, what are they doing that is valuable, right?
so what are your recommendations for coaches to kind of not eliminate, but like see these blind spots or biases and try and mitigate them?
Well, you can't live in an echo chamber. That's the biggest problem is you can't just consume one kind of information. You should always, this is a process that I try to apply all the time, is anytime I try to create a solution or find a solution to a problem, an exercise or an issue, I have to think to myself, what are three viable options to do this that are all distinctly different? And then I can give myself this ability to then say, what are the trade-offs between each one of these solutions? So, for example, would be like, you know, um, you look at a lifter or you look at a program or something, you're trying to learn about it. It's like, what are three possible, very distinct, different ways that this has worked? You've got like look at LSU program. Like, why are they all good? Well, like, what are three possible reasons? One, they were incredibly strong, and the reality is that kind of squatting, these high volume, high rep programs, like, um, you know, we would think that's not going to work because they're going to get slow and bad, and they clearly weren't. So maybe my thinking is wrong. And one option is that I'm actually just mistaken. They are fine. There's evidence for it right here. The other would be that maybe that is true, but at the same time, these people were so genetically talented, it didn't have a detrimental effect. And three, maybe there's some combination of these things and the actual structure of the program worked well. And maybe my previous thoughts about this are true to some degree, but not so true now. So you can look at this and say, what are like different possible reasons for something being true or different solutions to something, and then always analyze the trade-offs rather than looking for what is right and wrong. Assume that everything you think and everything you know is wrong, and assume that you're always you're always making wrong choices. Your goal and your job is to just make less wrong choices, right? Is to make a choice or a decision that is less wrong than it was before, because you can't be necessarily right, but you can be better than you were. So that's what I would say is the process to go about really excelling at this stuff.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago when you were here, you talked about answering why you do everything and creating like a decision tree of like one thing that made my programming infinitely better and faster and more efficient was spending the time at the start of being like, I need to understand every decision of why I made this and how I got there. Where it's, okay, I'm creating a new block. How long are each mesocycle? And it's like, why did I choose the mesocycle lengths that I did? Then why am I choosing the exercise selection that I am? And then the rep scheme that I am, and how it all correlates. And the more often I did that, the less often I was just like picking random things and then putting them into the system. And it's so much effort at the start, but as soon as you start conceptualizing, you can think about it in business kind of like your SOPs, creating your SOPs for programming or coaching, the more effective and more efficient you are, and the better you'll be able to at the end of the program be like, okay, so competition day went terribly, but all of these metrics leading up to that showed a lot of progress. So we might not have to scrap the whole program. We might be able to use this piece or that piece. Or when we did this, this thing went really well, or this thing didn't go well, or we should adjust these things. And if you don't kind of conceptualize all of the program, all of the training, you're just kind of guessing on the next block and the next block.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually one of the, to me, that's actually one of the, like, in my opinion, like the best qualities we can get out of like a language model is some of this ability to reason, right? And for it to give us a lot of this, we can build programming that's much more about like, hey, here's the constraints you have. These 5 exercises are great options. And you can give instruction like a coach, organize these in a systemic way that makes sense, moving from whatever, least specific to most, or from the highest position to the lowest, or intermix them, or whatever it is. So you can give instruction and you can give guidance without having to give prescription, which I think is very, very what makes a lot of this stuff powerful and cool. And like what's cool with us is like a lot of the programs we've spit out of like these program generators we built are unique and they're interesting, right? And it's like you can make a lot of cool things like that happen without having to say, do this many sets and reps, if that, then this, right? It's not that. It's actual like drawing connections between different things.
I'm excited to see what that kind of looks like.
Yeah.
Uh,
I posted a little
near,
demo of it in the Discord. You can go look
oh,
at it.
can tell you're in Oakland. I hear the sirens.
Yeah, yeah.
Holy. And then developing your own coaching over the past, what's it been, 5 years of the AI and
Yeah,
Coach
somewhere around
Logic
there.
or something.
Yeah.
How have you developed, and what are some of the key takeaways that you've had?
I mean, like I said, a lot of it is just built around it's all that stuff of like learning what's wrong, you learn a lot about how bad you are at running a company or how business. You learn a lot about how important, customers feedback is, and being, delivering better customer service. um, you also learn a lot about like what people want, and you realize like you talk to anybody and they'll tell you all kinds of weird stuff. You'll build a feature and somebody will be like, no one cares about that, and then you'll build others and they'll be like, the other thing you learn too is you can tell people about your idea, tell people about stuff, and they'll tell you how awesome it is and how much they want it, and then you build it and they're like, I don't want to pay for it, I don't actually want it. And so it's like an interesting thing where it's like you get into that place of like you learn a lot about how this stuff works in the bigger picture, right? Where it's like, okay, what's valuable, what's important, and what do we not need to waste time on? And you still do because you're an idiot. You know, that's what I would
Chip
say.
away at it.
Yeah.
And then, if you were to give one piece of advice to coaches developing, what would that be?
What would I give to developing coaches? I would say the most important thing is to stay really focused on doing a great job, like focus on development of what you're going, like what's in front of you. Be a good coach in the minute, learn the technique, learn to program and to coach, and keep refining, and just like hone your craft as much as you can, because at the end of the day, like, you know, all these other soft things, all these skills, marketing and sales and running a business, all these things are secondary to coaching. And if you're just fundamentally not doing a great job as a coach, everything else kind of falls apart. And you can make up for a lot of like weaknesses elsewhere if you are a great coach and you're doing a great job of those things.
And then last, if we were to revisit this conversation with AI being so quick in like 5 years from now, you revisit this conversation, what would you hope has changed both in the coaching landscape and with the apps that you're using?
I would hope that I'm on a beach somewhere, sitting on a giant pile of cash and saying, "Yeah, I'm glad we sold that." No, I mean, I don't know. 5 years is such a long time now. I would think that I would say in 5 years, I would hope that a lot of what we talked about happened, and it was a good thing for everybody, or that in 5 years, like we learned a lot about we learned new stuff about lifting and training that was really cool. That we helped improve a lot of people's ability to coach and to make money in these things.
Sweet. Where can people find you, Max?
You can find me on Instagram, Max_Aita. Go to YouTube as well, Coach Max Aita on YouTube, which is growing. We got. I think we're almost 7,000 subscribers.
I've heard a lot of positive things about your YouTube lately.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm flying to Slovenia to do another round of content there, because it's infinitely cheaper to go there than Southern California. And then, and then obviously, you can reach out to me, max@coachlogic.com. If you have any questions or want to try the app or you want remote coaching or something like that, then hit me up.
Sweet. Thank you for coming and listening to this episode of the Weight of Coaching podcast.
Nice.
If you got something or you want to share this podcast, please do. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, all those kinds of things. Thank you.